Imagine being born with a face that no one can look at without fear. No, this isn't a horror story or some made-up folktale. This was the life of a girl named Lila. It all started with a simple accident. Lila's mother, Miriam, was cooking one evening, just like she did every day, when something went horribly wrong. Hot oil spilled from the pan and splashed across her stomach. Miriam screamed in pain, but no one could predict the devastating aftermath. What no one knew then was that the oil didn't just burn Miriam. It burned Lila, too, the baby growing inside her. And because of that, Lila was born with a face no one could look at. Her skin was scarred, her features disfigured. It was so bad that everyone who looked at her face died. Yep, you heard that right. Doctors, nurses, family members, they all passed out in terror at the sight of her, their hearts racing so fast they couldn't survive it. Except for Miriam and Isaac, her parents. Lila was their child, and no matter what, they loved her. But even they couldn't protect her from the cruel world. So, they did the only thing they could, they kept her hidden. Lila grew up behind closed doors, never seeing the world outside, and certainly never showing her face. As Lila grew older, the loneliness began to eat her up. She spent her days studying at home, with only her parents for company. She had no friends, no one to talk to. By the time she was 10, something inside her snapped. She couldn't stay locked away forever. "I want to go to school," she told her parents one evening. "I need to meet people. I can't live like this." It was the first time she'd ever said anything like it. Her parents were scared. They knew the world wouldn't understand. But seeing the desperation in her eyes, they relented. They sent Lila to the Joy Academy Secondary School. Little did they know, that's where the real nightmare would begin. Now, before we continue, if you have watched up until now, it is because you enjoyed the story. Please be kind enough to give this video a like, drop your comments, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this. Now back to the story. When Lila walked into her new school, her heart was pounding in her chest. Her mask, handmade and carefully fitted to cover the disfigurement on her face, was the only thing keeping her from breaking down. She had never been around so many people before, and the thought of anyone seeing her real face made her feel sick with fear. The school bell rang, and students spilled into the halls, laughing and talking. Lila stood in the corner, feeling invisible. But it didn't take long before the whisper started. "Who's that girl with the mask?" someone asked. "I heard she's weird, like, really weird." "What's under that thing?" another voice snickered. Lila wanted to disappear. She just wanted to go home. But she forced herself to stay. She was here for a reason, she didn't want to be alone anymore. But no one was kind. In fact, things got worse. Every single day, someone would find a reason to laugh at her. Some kids would even pull at her mask when she wasn't looking, just to see if she'd react. But the worst was Mercy, Merciless Mercy, as she was known at school. Mercy was the queen bee. If you weren't in her circle, you were nothing. From day one, Mercy made Lila her target. "Hey, freak! What's under that mask? Scared we'll see your face?" Mercy would shout, her friends snickering behind her. Lila never said much. She kept her head down, her mask on, and her heart hidden. But deep down, the bullying was starting to take its toll. Still, there were some who noticed more than just the mask. They saw how intelligent Lila was, how calm and collected. She didn't shout or fight back, but when the teacher asked a question, Lila would raise her hand and answer with a quiet certainty that left everyone in awe. "Wow, Lila, you really know your stuff," one of the quieter girls in her class, Sarah, said one day. Lila smiled, though it was a small one. She didn't have many friends, actually, none, but moments like that made her feel like she wasn't invisible. At least someone noticed her. But then came him. Alex. The new guy. He was everything that Mercy and her friends were not: handsome, kind, and not at all interested in what everyone else cared about. While Mercy and her gang tried to get his attention, Alex was more focused on his studies and, oddly enough, on Lila. He'd seen her answer questions in class, and even though she always kept to herself, there was something about her that caught his eye. One day, they crossed paths in the library. Lila was lost in her books when she dropped her wallet. As she bent down to pick it up, she saw Alex standing there, holding it in his hand, an easy smile on his face. "You dropped this," he said, handing it back to her. Lila froze. Her heart raced. Alex didn't flinch or act uncomfortable. He was just normal. "Thank you," Lila whispered, feeling awkward. But Alex didn't go away. Instead, he stayed a moment longer, his eyes curious. "Hey," he said, "I noticed you don't seem to have many friends. If you ever want to talk, you know, I'm here." Lila's stomach twisted. She couldn't tell if he was just being polite or if he really meant it. The idea of someone wanting to talk to her, someone seeing her for who she really was, felt so strange. "Thanks," she said quietly, trying to hide behind her mask. She wasn't ready for anyone to see the real her. Not yet. As weeks went by, Alex kept showing up at the right moments. He'd ask her about a homework question, or sit next to her during lunch, just more, normal things. It was easy to pretend he was just another classmate, but the truth was, Lila was starting to feel something for him. A quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, someone could see past her mask and like her for who she really was. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a cold afternoon in the last semester of school, right before graduation. Lila was sitting in the library, finishing up a project, when Alex appeared at her table. He seemed unusually serious. "Lila," he said, his voice low but kind. "I've been thinking about you. About everything. And I have a question." Lila's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Alex hesitated for a second before speaking. "I know you wear a mask all the time. And I respect that, it's your choice. But I'm wondering, would you consider showing your face at graduation?" Lila froze. Her first thought was to run. The idea of exposing herself, of letting everyone see her real face, was terrifying. What if they couldn't handle it? What if they reacted the way everyone always did? "I don't know if I can," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not asking for you to do anything you're not ready for," Alex said gently. "But I think it's time for you to stop hiding. You're more than just what's under that mask. You deserve to be free." His words hit her like a wave. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't scared of her. Someone saw her for who she really was. And maybe, just maybe, she could see herself that way too. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice shaky but filled with something new, hope. The days leading up to graduation were a blur for Lila. Every time she thought about Alex's request, her stomach twisted with fear. What if no one could handle it? What if the moment she took off the mask, the world would fall apart again? Her heart raced at the thought, but Alex's words echoed in her mind, "You deserve to be free." She spent hours staring at herself in the mirror, mask in hand, trying to summon the courage to reveal what had been hidden for so long. She'd always believed that her face was a curse, something that separated her from the rest of the world. But Alex had made her wonder if it was only a curse because she had kept it hidden for so long. On the morning of graduation, the weight of it all hit Lila like a wave. She stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, the mask resting on the table beside her. Her hands shook as she reached for it, holding it up to her face. But before she could place it on, she stopped. She looked at herself, really looked. The scars, the uneven skin, the face she'd tried to hide for so many years, it was all there. But was it really that bad? Was it really worth hiding forever? With a deep breath, Lila set the mask down and walked out of her room. She knew she couldn't go through with it. Not anymore. As she stepped into the graduation hall, she felt the familiar sting of anxiety. The chatter of students filled the room, but it felt so distant. Her eyes nervously scanned the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She could already feel the weight of their stares, the whispers she had grown used to. She had no mask to hide behind this time. It was just her. When she walked through the door, everything seemed to slow down. She could hear people's voices drop, the murmur of their surprise. Her skin crawled as she tried to ignore the way their gazes locked onto her, their expressions frozen in shock. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But then she saw him. Alex stood at the front of the room, his eyes meeting hers immediately. There was no fear. No hesitation. Just understanding. And something more. His gaze held hers, unwavering, like he saw more than just the scars on her face. He saw her. Lila's legs felt weak as she walked toward him, feeling the eyes of everyone on her, but Alex didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward, his voice calm, but firm. "Hey, everyone," he called out, his tone carrying across the room. The whispers immediately died down. "Stop. Just stop." Lila's heart skipped a beat as Alex turned to face the students who were still staring at her. He wasn't shouting, but there was a steeliness to his words that made everyone fall silent. "This is Lila," he said. "She's my classmate. She's intelligent, kind, and deserves your respect. It doesn't matter what she looks like. She's not a freak, and neither should any of you be." For the first time in her life, Lila felt a spark of hope. Someone had spoken up for her. Someone had defended her. And it was Alex. The students who had once mocked her, who had made her feel like an outcast, began to shift uncomfortably. Some looked at the ground, others avoided her eyes, but none of them dared to make a sound. And then, something incredible happened. One by one, students started to walk up to Lila, their expressions changing from fear to something else. Apologies. Soft, hesitant words at first, but with real sincerity. "I'm sorry," one girl said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to." Another student, a boy who had often made fun of her in the halls, came up next. "I'm sorry, too. I was just stupid. I shouldn't have judged you." Lila's heart was pounding, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from a strange, new feeling. Acceptance. And then, Mercy, the queen bee, the one who had tormented her the most, stepped forward. "I'm sorry, too," Mercy said, her voice quieter than usual. It wasn't what Lila had expected. She had thought Mercy would make some cruel joke, mock her father, but instead, there was something different in her eyes. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was something else. But she spoke the words Lila had never thought she'd hear. "I was wrong." Lila stood there, in the middle of the room, with her face exposed for the first time. Her hands trembled, but her heart swelled with something she hadn't felt in years: relief. The world didn't come crashing down. No one screamed. No one ran away. Instead, people saw her. And more importantly, they accepted her. Alex stepped forward and took Lila's hand, his touch warm and comforting. "You're beautiful just the way you are, Lila," he said softly. "You always have been." Tears welled up in Lila's eyes as she looked around the room. She had spent so many years believing she was unworthy, believing that her appearance was something to hide. But now, here she was, standing tall, no longer hiding, and for the first time in her life, she felt seen. And as the graduation ceremony went on, Lila didn't just feel like a student who had passed through the system. She felt like someone who had finally found her place in the world. Not because she had changed, but because she had been accepted exactly as she was. She smiled, a real smile this time. And as the applause echoed around her, Lila knew she was free. Free to live her life without fear. Free to be herself. And most of all, free to stop hiding behind the mask.